Marriage restoration. Let's talk about it. Is it divine? Is it delulu? If you believe in it, does that make you weak? And if not, does it make you worldly? And on the other hand, if you don't, does that make you courageous or calloused? Today, we're going to touch on topics such as challenging your beliefs, the role that insecurity plays in maintaining the image of righteousness, and that thing that aids in your healing not necessarily being the thing that sets you free. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Our Mess His Canvas, the podcast. I am your host, Juvon. Here's the thing. I recorded this episode 4 times. It is a very sensitive topic and I wanted to approach it cautiously, share my views, express my beliefs while maintaining balance, respect, and truth. Why is it a sensitive topic? Well, for a number of reasons. It's a topic that is so divided, both in society and from a biblical standpoint. Society believes there's cheating, that means you're done. But also, there is an opportunity for second chances and working things out. From the biblical standpoint, infidelity is grounds for divorce, but also there is forgiveness and fighting to preserve the marriage covenant. But the other reason as to why this is such a sensitive topic is because I was once a part of a community that believes in the premise of marriage restoration. So you may be asking, well, how you get to that place? You don't think that you endure enough hurt, heartbreak, betrayal? Why are you choosing to run behind someone who clearly does not want you? Why would you fight for something if you are the only one fighting? You're so desperate for this man? You don't think you deserve better? On the other hand, some may be asking, well, why aren't you a part of that community anymore? Did you stop believing? You stop hoping? Did you lose faith? You gave up? You have to forgive. You have to fight. To an extent, I can understand both perspectives. And later, I will share my views on why that is. But first, I want to talk about the lead up to getting to that part. So, in my quest to find solace in the state of my confusion, I decided to get back into my word. I said I may not find the exact situation, but maybe I could get something to bring me peace in figuring out how to navigate my current experience. And I don't know if it's because I didn't pay much attention in Sunday school, or the fact that sometimes the church mostly focuses on prosperity gospel, but I was recognizing a common trend. We often hear about Job and him being the exemplar of righteousness and how he lost everything and how he had to suffer. But then God restored everything that he had lost, more than he had lost. You know, we hear about David slaying Goliath, David being anointed as king, but not the David that was struggling with lust, and how he took out a man to get his wife. He killed a man to secure his side chick, but he did nothing to defend his daughter when she was raped. Yet he was a man after God's own heart. We hear about Jacob, his love and dedication to Rachel, and he worked so hard to get her and his sons who were the 12 tribes of Israel. But this man had 4 baby mamas. 4, sometimes bargaining. Who wants him tonight? I'll trade you. We hear about Moses being saved from the mass killings by floating on a woven basket along the river and then leading the Israelites out of Egypt. But we don't hear much about the fact that this man killed another man out of anger right before God called him on a mission. We talk about Noah, responsible for saving mankind and creation because of his obedience to God. And then right after that, getting drunk to the point that his son was cursed for talking about the condition that he was in. Anyway, the point is that I was recognizing the trend that God was using imperfect people. Not when they got it together, but when they were continuously messing up. I recognized that my marriage, being in a mess, is not a reason why it couldn't be restored. But even though I felt God nudging me to consider restoration, I couldn't come into agreement with it, with why he would allow this pain and then ask me to stay and restore, when he could have just stopped it from happening in the first place. Furthermore, he could have stopped me from forming this covenant to begin with. It's too much to forgive. I'm not staying to fix this man. I am not Bob. This is too much mess for me. Maybe not for God, but it's too much for me. But I began to open my mind some more on the idea. I wanted to understand why I should choose to do this. I began to consider the other perspectives. I took the opportunity to deconstruct and understand the way that God designed the marriage covenant, the beauty and the benefits of it. I started to understand the actions of a person who is broken, the emotional and spiritual aspects of it. I started to understand the fact that not everyone is equipped with the tools for clear and effective communication. And as skewed as that may be to accept, it is the reality and the truth for many. So I began to develop my spiritual and emotional intelligence behind what influences the actions of someone who chooses to be unfaithful. But then I'd renege. I'd say, nah, that making me look like a punk. I'm looking like a simp. And I ain't like that. I could go on the depth and the complexities that is tied to considering marriage restoration. It isn't for the weak. And many times, you would hear it expressed that marriage restoration is bigger than just you. It is more than just the reunification of a husband and wife. It is bigger than just true love. It is more about breaking curses that have been in the bloodline for generations. There is a level of emotional and spiritual maturity to attain before attempting to embark on that stand. Anyway, because of the dynamic between the narcissist and the empath, I was naturally drawn to the idea, but not if it was at the expense of me losing myself again. Needless to say that it took me a long time to come into alignment, but the thing that was attracting me at this point wasn't the idea that this could potentially be restored. It was the peace that came with me having hope and exercising compassion. I was healing. I was learning how to heal without resentment, without bitterness, without anger, learning how to forgive without the apology, without acknowledgement, without someone who was taking accountability for what they had done. I learned how to exercise unrequited kindness. I was realizing that this was more about my healing than it was about a promise. Learning that contrary to what society would have us believe, their actions and their choices are not because of how little or how much we really mean to them, but because of brokenness and pain, and the way in which they resort to soothing and relieving that pain. Learning about the behavioral patterns, mindsets, and fears of people who had abandonment issues and unhealthy attachment styles. Learning characteristics of avoidance and their rejection sensitivities and their fear of being alone. So while I was developing deep compassion and my heart was in a posture that allowed for proper healing, I was struggling. I was struggling with the reality that I was waiting on something that just was not happening. Hope started to feel like suffering. Faith started to feel like a punishment. Believing felt foolish and desperate. I was struggling because it felt like I was starting another cycle of some sort of abuse. So I would challenge God. I'd say, God, you conditioning me for abuse. This cannot be what your intentions are for me. Again, seeing the importance in community, I became a part of a group that was standing for their marriage while shifting their focus to pursuing purpose. This seemed more like something I could get behind. But with everything, there is always a bit of distortion. The reality is that while some were actively healing and wanting to shift their focus to purpose, while they were waiting, some others had a genuine inability to get past certain hurts and ideas. There were concepts that just weren't as easy to apply, and instead of addressing those, it started to become a form of taboo within the community. There was a fear about raising certain topics and expressing certain concerns and true feelings of confusion because it came with the potential for doubt. The whole concept of marriage restoration is such a tricky thing to navigate. I experienced constantly being in a state of cognitive dissonance, choosing, sometimes forcing to hold on to a belief when I was conflicted by my experiences and the feelings that were tied to them. Being conditioned to feed faith, starved out, ignore your feelings because that's where the enemy can meet you and keep you bound. This whole idea began to feel like a trap to me and I was struggling. I realized that the concerns that were being rebuked as operating in a spirit of something were genuine concerns from deep brokenness and a genuine inability to get past certain points in the healing process. Some people were really struggling with certain concepts as to how they even ended up here. And in an attempt for clarity, They were being accused of being in idolatry, operating in the flesh, operating in pride, and whereas some of those may be accurate, it came off as an attack. And what happens to people when they're attacked? They get defensive. Instead of a coming together, there was a gnashing of teeth. On the other hand, I also witnessed some express that their spouses were returning home. But then the wives are still struggling with insecurity and low self-esteem. And when their spouses are opening up to them about some of their struggles and their experiences, the wives are not in a place where they're healed enough to listen objectively, and now they're butthurt. Instead of taking the time and placing the emphasis on healing, there was a hyperfixation on prayer and intercession for this man to come back home. I want to make it clear that I am not against praying and interceding on behalf of a partner or a spouse. But if it is taking the place of something that is supposed to be happening in that moment that is more beneficial, if the separation is an opportunity for you to develop yourself, to grow, and to heal, and instead you're using that opportunity, you're using that time to pray and intercede and beg God to send this man back home. When this person returns and you are not ready, you're going to make a mess of the very thing that you were praying for. I couldn't subscribe to the idea that God, who knows the number of strands of hair on my head, didn't care about my feelings. Realizing I had questions, but being chastised for seeking clarity. Realizing brokenness and hurt, and while others saw it as operating in some kind of spirit, I saw it as a genuine cry for help, a genuine cry for understanding, a genuine cry for clarity. It was a clashing that I could no longer ignore, and I had to let go. And so I was confused. I said, God, it took me so long to come into agreement with this whole idea of marriage restoration. And now you're asking me to leave. Was I misled? I'm looking like a fraud. And now that I'm on this new venture, I felt like I was contradicting something that I believed for a long time. I felt that I had some form of responsibility in having this platform to not be misleading an audience. So I was asking God to make this make sense for me. On the other hand, being a part of a community allowed me the opportunity to discover my giftings. There were things that I took for granted that I thought were normal when they were really spiritual gifts. And I had the opportunity to tap in and to learn about those. I had the opportunity to discern God's voice and to fine-tune the way in which He speaks to me. For me, I had to let go because I did not have room for hope and pursuing purpose. That's when God gave me the understanding that the whole idea of marriage restoration for me was like a cast. It served the purpose of keeping my heart in a specific position so that I can heal properly. But what happens when you leave a cast on for too long? There is irritation, infection, skin problems, nerve damage, even muscle atrophy. Getting to that place of understanding that marriage restoration is not a one-size-fits-all, that there are varying degrees of what could be restored, how that restoration takes place, and that each process is different. Understanding that some marriages could be in a place where just an oil change is necessary, but some others are in such bad shape that the whole head gasket is blown, is not an easy fix. No amount of oil can solve this problem. In fact, you can be wasting oil. Either this thing is replaced, or in some cases, get a whole new engine. One thing I can tell you is that staying in the shop and waiting for that to happen is just a recipe for frustration and driving yourself insane. You find yourself rushing the mechanic, he gave you a half-picked duck, and 2 months down the road you have to come right back to bring this thing to the shop because it's ain't working properly. Challenging your beliefs can allow you the opportunity to gain a clearer understanding that is particular to your situation. You're able to determine what is beneficial, what is practical, or even attainable for you. Understanding God's intentions for you can help you establish boundaries for yourself and to determine when they are being crossed, which means that you may be venturing too far. But it also helps you to assess your situation. Nick and Nancy were able to leave the shop because they just needed an oil change. But your blocks are cracked, babe. Your situation requires more than just an oil change. It is not practical. And you would not know this if you are afraid to challenge your beliefs. Sometimes we're afraid of challenging our beliefs because of insecurity. Insecurity can lead us to cling to beliefs that we are not assigned to or no longer serve us. Now we're trying to protect an image of being righteous in the eyes of others when this belief no longer fits our journey. For me, I had to come to terms with the reality that I could not hold space for hope and purpose. And I choose purpose. So to answer your question, yes, I do believe in marriage restoration. But I do not believe that there is any amount of intercession or any specific set of prayers that can take place that would make a person change their mind if they are not ready. That is manipulation. And manipulation is witchcraft. Sometimes, depending on the state of a person, God gives them over to a reprobate mind. Do you know what it is to be praying for somebody who is in a reprobate mind? You are opening yourself up to unnecessary spiritual warfare. I know. I had to endure that. Do I believe that God can and will restore my marriage? I believe that He can. Do I believe that He will? I honestly do not know. Does that make me delusional? Does that make me delulu? You know, there are some women who are out there believing that a man who is separated from his wife is a gift that came from God. Some women believe that they are blessed to get a man who is separated from his wife. So if I have to choose a flavor of delulu, then I choose to believe in the restoration of my marriage. My emphasis right now, however, is in becoming whole and fully healed, so that if and when I enter into a new relationship, I'm not coming with old hurts and I'm not bleeding on my partner. So I'll leave with this today. Marriages don't have to reach to the point of restoration. Relationships with toxic traits don't have to go undetected and evolve into a marriage. Individuals don't have to be intimidated by their singleness and choose to secure themselves by pursuing a relationship. People with unresolved trauma don't have to be terrified of healing and solitude, choosing to mask their pain under the guise of being the perfect soulmate. But the reality is that all of these happen and we don't talk about it enough. So instead of blaming yourself or get into fix-it mode, trying to mend something or someone that is not your job to fix, maybe you're open to the idea of a marriage restoration, but it feels like jumping into the deep end of a pool and you don't know how to swim. If your heart won't allow you to give up on people, but you lack boundaries, that puts you in a place where you danger yourself. If you want to ensure that you don't become the same thing that broke you, then I feel like there's no harm in talking about these things. Open your mind, shift a paradigm, consider a different perspective, or even change the status quo. Let's just talk about it. I've answered some of your questions. Now I'm going to ask you some questions. What beliefs are holding you hostage? Would you give yourself permission to challenge inherited theology? Go to God, challenge your beliefs. You won't be punished for going to God with your questions. That brings us to the end of today's session. Thank you so much for tuning in. I pray that you have an amazing rest of your week, and I will see you in the next episode.